Hello, and a very warm welcome to this In Retail conversation. My name is David Roth from WPP, and in today's In Retail conversation I'm joined by my guest Neil Stewart, who's the Chief Executive of Salmon.
Hi,
Neil,
David.
very warm welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about who Salmon are, for those of you who are not familiar with Salmon yet. But Salmon are one of the WPP digital companies in the e-commerce space, and have been part of WPP for exactly 2 years and almost 2 weeks now.
Correct.
So, and we'll be explaining a little bit more about the background to Salmon. And of course, the topic of our conversation is e-commerce. Clearly, over the course of the last year, e-commerce has grown exponentially, and we've seen even in a pretty tough retail environment, those retailers with an e-commerce operation over the critical sort of holiday period. That period clearly is getting longer and longer. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. But we've seen roughly an increase about sort of 20-25% or an average of e-commerce sales over that period. So even in a tough trading condition, we are seeing that the balance in the way in which consumers want to shop, want to spend their money, is changing, and the digital environment in one form or another is becoming a much more important part in retailers' portfolio of the way in which they generate consumer sales. Now, we've got a number of topics we're going to talk about, but if you've got a question for Neil, please send me an email. It's probably the quickest and easiest way of doing it, which is David.Roth, R-O-T-H, at WPP.com, and we will try and pick up as many of those questions as we can throughout the conversation. If you want to tweet as well, I'm at David Roth London, and Neil, you're
N Stewart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T, at salmon.com.
Great. So in the next 55 minutes, we've got an array of subjects to cover. What we've learned really over the last couple of years of growth in the holiday period, and especially this year's holiday period. But before we start on that, Neil, maybe a little bit of background on Salmon. We talk about e-commerce as being relatively new, but Salmon has been in existence for some 20 years. So perhaps you can give us a little bit of a feel of, I suppose, the origins of Salmon, who your clients are, and what type of e-commerce you're involved in now.
Okay. Yeah. So as you've described there, David, we've been around for a number of years. So 21 years as an organisation, and like most of the companies with a heritage in this space, we started really in the technology landscape. So we haven't been in e-commerce for the complete 21 years. We have been for about 15 years. So we were intrinsic in the delivery of the first £1 million site in the UK, which was for a company called Jungle.com, which, if we go back to those days, the main consumer market for e-com was technical people buying technical stuff. So we worked with Jungle.com, and then from there we've migrated into working with clients like Argos, Selfridges, and we've recently launched what we consider to be the world's largest grocery re-platform project for Sainsbury's. So we did quite a lot in grocery, and then as part of the journey into WPP, we've been able to get access to a number of brands, and we're in active discussions with a number of brands at the moment, looking at direct-to-consumer models, but also how they support their journey with retailers in the digital space.
Great. Overall, Neil, how would you typify the sort of, maybe not the 20-year journey, because obviously the nature of your business has changed significantly, but how would you typify, I suppose, the last 7 or 8 years as consumers have got much more comfortable with doing things digitally, companies have got much more comfortable with the whole notion of a physical presence and a virtual presence. What have you seen over the last few years in terms of the trends of all of this?
Well, I think the first piece is actually the consumers move dramatically quicker than the organisation. So use the word comfortability there. I think the consumer's been comfortable with the transition, and I think we use phrases like omni-channel and multi-channel and e-commerce, and actually to most consumers it's the purchase of a product and the research of a product. So pretty consistent with what they did before, but just done in a different channel. I think what's typified the last 7 years has been the internal challenges that organisations have had around existing structures and how they address consumers compared to how they do now in a less siloed way. So that would be typification. In regards to the types of products and shopping behaviour, I think we've seen a transformation from easily distributed products like CDs and books, etc. So obviously the basic Amazon model, to actually a myriad of products now. To the extent within grocery, we see trends that say the major shop that week will now be done digitally and more convenience at a local level. So we've seen it go from kind of fringe in essence to the majority of the purchases, specifically around research. And I think that's one of the major pieces that people don't consider as part of an e-commerce journey is the sheer weight of research that happens as part of that. So even if that purchases continue to a store base or to a competitor, then research is a dramatic part of the e-commerce journey. It's not always about the transaction.
I suppose we sort of forget that at our peril when we think about e-commerce. We sort of, well, I suppose the name itself is all about the end product of that, which is the purchasing. But as you rightly say, the whole sort of path to purchase has fundamentally changed, and gaining knowledge of one form or another, getting other people's views through recommendation sites or reviews, etc., has now become an intrinsic part of that path to purchase process. So let's pile in. I think probably a lot of questions, and we've had a few already, on sort of what are the key things that happened over Christmas and the holiday period. Let's tackle that first of all. Big changes out there in terms of sales going through some form of e-commerce engine over the Christmas period. What do we see over the holiday period?
Well, I think we saw two or three key pieces. I think we continued to, if we stay on kind of the grocery side of the discussion, we saw continued strong growth in regards to people ordering online and delivering to home and grocery, which hasn't always been the case in a kind of a shrinking market. So that's still been a strong case, and that's something for the grocers to really consider. We saw a shift of Boxing Day to earlier in the year, so we saw the arrival really at scale of Black Friday, I think, this year, specifically in the UK. And the impact that's had both on the promotional offer that the retailer puts forward, but also their underlying infrastructure to support that.
It's worth talking a little bit about that, because in a sense, Black Friday is nothing new from an American perspective. I suppose 2 years ago started to have a little bit of an impact, but this year it was really quite dramatic. So given that there was this sort of massive peak, and in fact certain retailers have reported to say that Black Friday this year was their biggest peak in history, certainly bigger than the Boxing Day peak now. What implications are there for how organisations sort of scale and cope, especially at sort of a technological architecture and the delivery aspects now that go behind that, of being able to cope with such a massive sort of 1-2 day peak?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think the first consideration is actually the organisation being realistic about the infrastructure that it has and its ability to service that type of demand, and it kind of falls back to the original point of being less siloed in addressing the consumer. So I think what we saw this year was the arrival of a new reason to provide an offer, which was Black Friday, and lots of retailers support that process from a marketing perspective. But actually, lots of infrastructure struggling to support that. So I think next year, hopefully we'll see better planned promotions to kind of even that out a little bit. But then also we'll see increasing technology around throttling that traffic. So
literally, if it's peaking, actually, taking the view that you actually need to calm it all down in order to make sure that you can cope and to, in a sense, take the decision to cut people off.
Yeah, we've engaged in those discussions with a number of our clients, this year, and the emotion around the throttling traffic is quite difficult for retailers.
Because in a sense, it's counterintuitive. You wouldn't stop people walking into your store because it was too busy, would you?
Our point is they do. So, Selfridges being one of our clients, if you've ever been to the Boxing Day sale at Selfridges, you'll know they do. They make you queue outside the front door, and principally this is no different. And it's about understanding, one, do we have stock in the right place, and two, can we fulfil the promise that we're going to give with that promotional offer? So I think there's a tie-up with the organisation, but then there's the technology set around throttling, which we did see this year. So there's the infamous case in the UK, I won't mention the retailer's name, where it provided you data on how long you were down the queue, and we have evidence of certain people being told it'll be 4 hours before they get access to the site. So maybe the customer experience around that could have been managed slightly better, but actually the principle behind it I think was correct, because those that didn't throttle, so a client in the UK, not of ours, but a major retailer. They then succumbed to huge issues for 2 weeks following, simply down to fulfillment partnership that they had. So the volume they took in promotionally just couldn't be fulfilled for 2 weeks.
So we are getting to the stage of almost having to pre-plan what's the customer experience going to be, what's going to happen to that experience if volume does go off the clock, and how do you manage the experience when you start to have to and need to throttle things back. Click and collect, another area that's clearly grown very fast. I mean, you were the guys that really created and invented click and collect.
I don't think we can claim the complete invent. We've been involved in it for about 14 years, and I think obviously the poster child around click and collect in the UK anyway is Argos, and we've been with them on that journey. And it's definitely we think this year it's matured in the usage of click and collect. So one of our clients is Whole Foods. I remember when we first started conversations around click and collect with Whole Foods, and the view on would people order online and pick up in store something as personal as a bike. We all questioned that at the time. I can tell you that 86% of online orders at Whole Foods are buy online, collect in store. So it does impact, and having looked at the data and the behaviour, we basically see there's an element of convenience there, but there's also an element of assurity that the product exists at the local store. So previously, people piling the children into the car and driving to the local store, actually not wanting to do that until they know the product's definitely there. So.
Well, we're going to come back to click and collect as a big subject for what we all need to be thinking about and doing for this year, and especially the holiday season for 2015. Mobile, what have we seen in mobile? It seems like there's this inexorable rise in mobile. What do you see from a technical perspective? Because obviously you're looking at the data of exactly what devices people are using. So what are we seeing in terms of mobile? What did we see, and what do you think we're going to be seeing?
Well, we're seeing from our client base, we're seeing a huge increase in the transaction level that goes through mobile. So last year, I mean, there was absolutely an increase last year, but we're seeing a larger increase this year. And by that, I mean the completion of the transaction. Previously, we've seen lots of research and we've seen lots of location and check of stock. But this year we saw a massive increase in transaction, but also the value of the transaction. So last year the average order value was less. This year it's bigger, and we're also seeing an increased confidence in consumers to purchase larger scale products than they have previously. So for one of our client Selvages, we're seeing the kind of the top end range of their electrical goods being confidently chosen and selected and bought on a mobile offering. So we think that will continue. We think some of that is the way that we report, so we can obviously identify the types of devices that are used, and as we know with the latest iPhone, there's a convergence there between an iPad and an iPhone, so some of that is the reason behind that. But also we think there's an increase in confidence and the ability to buy on a mobile offering.
Many people have been talking about this whole notion of, from a development perspective, from a technology perspective, now you need to have the mentality of it's mobile first and then develop everything after. What's your perspective on that?
That is an interesting question. It really depends on the product offer, we would say, and the level of inspiration that the organisation is looking to put forward. I mean, we actually. I mean, there's a huge drive in the retail world around responsive. Now, responsive's good, and it gives capability to meet the ever increasing number of devices in a cost-effective way. But the real driver behind that is making sure the experience is consistent and the ongoing cost is reduced. Actually, if you're able to pick between the real value of people across those different devices, maybe you want a different experience. The reality is the real estate is less on a phone than it is on a PC or on a tablet, whether that's used at home or at work. And actually the utilisation of that space may overcome the investment that you need in the support maintenance of the technology stack. So we have a mix of clients. We have some that are less need a less differentiated experience across devices for their product set, so reinsurance. We've got stuff around warranty, so responsive is of course appropriate for that. But then we look at Selvages, they understand that mobile is a very key channel to their target market, and we have a differentiated experience across the devices, and that works really well for them. Their figures this year on mobile were far stronger than they expected, and made a big difference to the bottom line.
Amazon started the ball rolling with Amazon Prime, some form of subscription in you know, different ways, and obviously they've been increasing what you get for your subscription, both in the digital space and other spaces. What's your view on subscriptions? Because we're beginning to see more and more retailers bundling things together in a subscription, be it delivery, be it other related services.
Well, we're seeing probably absolutely Amazon have made the market, and I think the reason they've been able to do that is the sheer weight and scale of the product set that they offer. So you know, a subscription model with someone that you're potentially going to have a relationship with continually over the year, it makes an awful lot of sense. Obviously, there are certain retailers you may visit on a less period, which makes it more difficult. The first piece we've seen in the UK market is the grocery market. So delivery pass, in essence, being the equivalent of the Prime model for Amazon. We think that will then extend. So if you take the relationship with the grocer, will probably be at minimum 1 delivery a week. We've seen Delivery Pass extend that to potentially up to 3 deliveries a week, so less one big shop, now 3 shops over the week, because that's bundled in a Delivery Pass offering. What that also provides is a huge amount of data to those organisations that give you that subscription offering around delivery. So they're seeing the frequency of product order, but also the types of products.
So are subscriptions leading to increased customer loyalty, or is it changing just the nature of the way in which somebody does their shopping on the basis that they want to maximise the value they get out of that subscription?
From a grocery perspective, it's both. So it's increased customer loyalty, so more deliveries obviously translates to increased loyalty because there's more shopping journeys that are happening there. But then also from an average order value, we're seeing that reduce because of the more frequency, but actually overall an increased value within the week. The data that provides those retailers, whether that be Amazon or the grocers, really helps them personalise the offer, and our view with the clients that we work with, they can consistently see about 60% of the order that you're about to make. We think that's the next journey for subscription, which is today it's very delivery focused. Moving forward, we think it'll be very replenishment and auto order focused. So we think the grocers are probably lead into that space, and we're all aware in the market of the investment that Amazon are making around predictive delivery and making sure those products are closer to your home.
Now, we've had a question from somebody asking about whether the subscription services are a way of increasing the margin, making things more profitable for the retailer, or are more sort of related to the customer service side of the equation. What's your feel?
Probably sitting on the fence a little bit, but again, it's a little bit of both. One is it's mainly driven by customer experience, and the market dynamic of competitors moving into that space means most of them are driven there. Again, what it does provide though is a very rich set of replenishment data. Now once you have that replenishment data, very different than a store. When you arrive at the journey with that retailer, they can pretty much personalise what you see in a very sophisticated manner. Now, it's not a difficult jump for them to make that profit optimised, if that makes sense. So I think there's still some sophistication to happen in that market, but the more subscription, the more replenishment based become, the easier that will be for the retailer to manage what you see and what you don't see, and I'm sure one of the dynamics behind that will of course be margin.
You know, when the store manager in a store in Scunthorpe doesn't turn up for the day and the store's closed or nobody can get in, it hardly makes a headline.
Correct.
Even in the Scunthorpe Gazette it probably doesn't actually make a headline. But when people can't get onto an e-commerce site, now that is national news.
Correct. Yes, it is.
What implications is that having?
Well, I think one, it's a learning for the team at the top table, which is to the point you've just made there. If there's an issue in Scunthorpe around 40 orders, then that's probably managed by the Scunthorpe local manager or maybe an area manager, and isn't really exposed potentially to the team at the top. I think obviously once specific comments arrive in the Daily Mail, that's a different place. So I think one that needs to be a tighter communication across organisations of when those issues happen, the PR machine kicks into play an awful lot quicker. So they have to be joined up with the issues that traditionally have been seen as IT issues. So we have an issue in IT, do the PR engine in an organisation really know about it, and do they manage it effectively? So I think that relationship needs to be tighter. I also think there is an element of, we're kind of in our third peak this year, I would say, where we've seen the dramatisation of an issue, which fits it. We have we have the Christmas peak, we have Betty without her turkey, etc., and that's obviously a good news story. I think that there needs to be a management of that within the overall realm of the level and volume that happens. So I think one is the organisation's being tighter on what to do when those issues happen. Secondly, making sure there's investment in infrastructure to minimise those as much as possible. But then thirdly, I think as consumers we'll start to understand that in the realm of 1 million orders, sometimes there are issues with 2 or 3, and I think obviously has to be managed that way also.
But it really, I mean, this year I think it exacerbated it, and we can only assume it will get worse in a sense. But it is making front page news when large retailers have an outage in their e-commerce operation, or deliveries aren't made, or I mean, it's a big reputational risk now for companies and retailers, and for delivery companies as well. Whereas 2 or 3 years ago it wasn't as prevalent, and I think that's only going to increase, isn't it? I think
it is going to increase, and I think organisations are going to have to become increasingly mature around the investment they put into that space and the people they make that investment with, and then secondly around, again, being honest within their own internal structure around the capability that they have. There's no point in having a huge marketing event if actually you can't fulfil that order, and I think that's again a learning for companies to go through. And
I suppose this is also an area where throttling, in a sense, comes into its own, with that whole sort of strategic issue of when do you throttle, how do you throttle, and the reputational risks around not doing that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think we've seen a maturity in the organisations that we talk to around understanding the drive behind that now, and also I think the challenge around Black Friday. Sorry to move back to that point is, as you said, that's actually an Americanism that we've brought into the UK. If we look at the figures we saw across our client base, it really was a transfer of a number of orders from the Boxing Day to prior to Christmas, and there is some margin erosion in that. There are those lost orders that would have happened up to the Christmas point, that then the sale would have kicked in Boxing Day. So I think what we're seeing is a change in the consumer, change in the organisation, and I think the fortunate thing in the e-commerce space is it's very supported by data, and organisations understanding the data and the impact of that. I think we'll continue to see that mature and change over time.
Yeah, I think we heard when we had an in-retail conversation with Brian Roberts of Kantar Retail, just how sort of Black Friday from a retailer perspective was gaining momentum. Clearly we see it from a consumer perspective here. It is definitely reshaping that Christmas period, and I think retailers are going to have to look at the whole way that they manage the margin over that extended period of time. And I think Boxing Day, we've seen sort of the last, I think, of Boxing Day being the largest sort of peak in terms of sale period over the holiday period, as I think that moves into Black Friday. Neil, you do a lot of work with retailers, grocery retailers. Clearly, grocery retailers are very interrelated with the whole FMCG marketplace. So, what do we see this year over the holiday period in relation to e-commerce and FMCG, and what impact and strategic implications is that going to have for the years ahead?
Well, I think from a sheer numbers perspective, we saw real challenge in the store base, and we saw growth in the digital channel e-commerce. So that's obviously then becoming increasingly important from the FMCG teams. I think from our experience, we also saw lots of the brands starting to awaken about how they can help influence that e-commerce journey to their products, similar to the way they do in store. And I mean that around the shopper marketing techniques. I think obviously they're very mature in most of the brands that exist, and the way that they engage with the retailer, that's less mature that we see in the e-commerce space. So we're seeing more and more of those organisations ask about how they can have the same level of impact, and we've been helping a number of them understand how providing better content, better data, better promotional offers to the retailer to make their life an awful lot easier means they have a stronger impact.
Is that starting to require, and will that require different skill sets that the FMCG companies to be able to understand, analyse, and be able to respond to that? I think
it's a number of things. I think it's a new channel into the retailer. And again, this is an organisational structure. I think the traditional channels into a retailer around ensuring those promotional banners are correct and in the right place have been very store focused, and now it's not so store focused. So I think there's a different channel and conversation that needs to happen. But then I think there's also has to be an acceptance there's a different provision of assets and capability, and I think that's what lots of the brands that we've spoken to are grappling with at the moment. So some of that they've outsourced traditionally, but they're very interested in understanding what provides real value and what doesn't. And the value exchange to that is different than a store base. I mean, if a good relationship exists with a retailer, then the information that comes back is inherently stronger as well, because it's recorded and it's known and it can be analysed an awful lot better. So we're seeing quite a drive from pretty much every major brand organisation out there in that space.
And I suppose the elephant in the room is this whole notion of, can the manufacturers, brand owners, bypass the retailer and start going direct, and what are you seeing?
I mean, and this won't be a surprise to anyone, it's very product focused, and I think there's specific categories that I think will enable a number of the FMCG brands to have a direct relationship. So we take baby, or we take pet food, or something of a replenishment play, where actually the trust and the inspiration it tends to be provided by the brand, not by the retailer. So there is already an intrinsic relationship there at some level, and it's replenished on a consistent basis that makes the fulfillment piece affordable from the brand perspective. I think the specific brands that open up that side and capability, obviously some of the smaller offerings become a bit more challenging, and in essence the retailer acts as an aggregator. I think it is an elephant in the room, but for us, and unfortunately we've probably been around a bit too long, I remember this conversation with the sports goods manufacturers. You know, they were in the same place. We're worried about, you know, channel conflict, and then Nike doesn't seem to have a problem getting past that, and neither do the others. So I think we'll see that level of maturity start to exist as we move forward.
And what would you say in the future in terms of who becomes the retailer? Is everybody going to become a retailer?
Well, I think the huge question, and you could probably answer better than me, David, to throw it back, is what is the role of the retailer? So as we stand today, the role of the retailer is access. You know, if they're not manufacturer of products, so. And apologies to use the grocery analogy again, but it seems the most consistent one to use. It's been about aggregation and access to product. And actually, if you think about the journey in a supermarket, it's kind of self-service anyway. So it's been an aggregation and replenishment play. If that changes over time due to direct relationships with the brands, does that role become more about inspiration and guidance and the launch of new capabilities? I don't know, but I think the retail will always exist. I think the role of the retailer will change, and we have a few views on that, but I know the market does as well. So I think it will change over time. I think those retailers that work really strongly with brands, that open up data, that provide insight, and also allow them to launch and inspire consumers will succeed. I think those retailers that try and keep that information to themselves and brands at arm's length will continue to, will potentially struggle.
I mean, I think it is. I mean, the whole issue of what is a retailer going to be in the future is maybe the subject of another in retail conversation, but it is fascinating, and we're all across the group doing lots of work with clients on exactly what their retail proposition is going to be in the future. I think one of the really interesting things for me is, and you sort of touched upon it, is the fact that sorry, I apologise for the noise. I think it will go off in a minute. We'll carry on. Is this whole sort of channel conflict issue, where again, a few years ago, everybody was getting very hot under the collar about channel conflicts and selling direct. And I think now people have realised, not just in the retail FMCG marketplace, but across lots of different industries, that somebody who on one area of business is a partner, on another area of business is a competitor. I think people are getting much less stressed out about this whole sort of conflict of channels and who's a retailer, who's a manufacturer, who's selling, whose customer it is.
And I think that's a traditional approach to the market. And again, you asked me what the big change had been over the last 7 years. I think channels and distribution channels are a disease of the existing market, whereas the consumer doesn't really see that. The consumer sees access to a product when they want access to the product in any way, shape that they can, and I think that will probably help through that journey also. Organisations succeed that listen to the customers, don't they? Those that don't tend to be in the place.
Let's talk about customers then.
Okay.
So we see this year, in terms of just how technology is moving fast. a significant reduction in the number of iPad sales, and plays to your point slightly earlier on the importance of mobile. What are we seeing here, and what's the significance going to be?
So from a retail perspective, we've seen a huge shift from PC to tablet. So we can see that. So from a usage perspective, the sales of tablet may be reducing, and we'll probably see that filter through next year. But actually, the usage of tablet is still growing in the majority of the retailers that we work with. There's definitely an exponential growth in regards to mobile. It's actually the PC environment that seems to be reducing most compared to the other sides. Again, I think this potentially is part of the market as those offerings kind of converge, and we kind of have we have the offering that's in between the two. Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more consumers, as we talked about from the retail point of view, but from the consumer point of view, finding click and collect significantly more convenient for them than home delivery.
Yeah. So every one of our clients continues to grow in the click and collect space, and also becoming increasingly smarter around monetizing that offering. So one of our clients, Argos, as we've discussed, it's about 50% of their complete retail offering now in regards to the revenue that comes into the organisation is via click and collect. For those UK-based individuals of my age will remember, used to go to an Argos and there was never a product on the ground. Now it's becoming a store in its own right. And they're also becoming more smarter around monetising that traffic in regards to kind of shopper marketing offers as well. So yeah, it's definitely landed, it's definitely mature, and I think from a retail perspective, there's becoming an increased understanding how they monetise and gain value of that change.
One of the key sort of consumer benefits of big sort of supermarkets, hypermarkets, was the notion of doing one big shop, maybe a weekly shop, for some maybe a monthly shop, and then doing and that was done in the hypermarket, in the supermarket, and maybe topping up with small purchases, distress purchases through the week or through the month. We are beginning to see now a change in that sort of pattern, which is having an impact on the fundamentals of large, big supermarket stores, aren't we?
We are, and not just in the UK. We're also seeing that kind of across Europe. I think subscription is a key part of that. So the subscription petrol prices in the UK, although recently have dropped, have also been a part of that, which is from a subscription model, delivery to home being actually cheaper than getting the family into the car and going to the main shop. So we from a grocery perspective have seen quite a large increase in the large weekly replenishment, and that's driven, we believe, quite an increase in the convenience play in the UK, and we think that will be consistent in other markets also.
So what are we seeing? We're seeing people doing their large big shop online as opposed to going into the store.
Correct.
And then infilling over the week or the month, and using the large stores as a convenience play.
As a convenience play, and I think if you look at from a grocery perspective, the information that exists in electronic format around knowing 60% of the order. I mean, there's two that either saves time in the shop, or actually we like to think that opens up opportunity to be more inspirational in the other 40%. And I think that's where we're seeing a split between kind of replenishment and the local convenience. There are specific products that people like to spend more time looking at, whether that be fruit and veg or bakery, compared to some of the more replenishment nappies, etc., that exist.
As our homes and maybe our devices become significantly smarter, and the allure and the promise of the Internet of Things finally starts to get delivered, and our fridge and our larders and cupboards will know what's in there and the rate of usage. Do you see that whole notion of sort of smart ordering replenishment beginning to start to kick in? Obviously it's tiny at the moment, but in the same way as the system in one form or another can guess as to what your 60% likely purchases are likely to be the next month's shop based on your past history. Are we likely to see that intelligence being supplemented by smart devices in our homes?
Well, we know the technology's there. That's arrived this year, and we know that the technology to be able to see what's been used and automatically add that to an electronic basket somewhere. But then also price comparison that against multiple offers from retailers, which I think is something that assists with the trust discussion. Obviously, we think one of the challenges around that auto replenishment is a level of loss of control around choice and price. But we think that a dynamic of the technology also being able to check and balance that against other retail offerings kind of helps with that. So the technology is definitely there. I think for those families and those consumers that are confident in the cycle of replenishment already, that's quite an easy journey. I think there is still a trust curve to go through in regards to giving up that weekly shop, and I think, but there's no reason why it won't be. I mean, it's price, product, place, promotion, and convenience, isn't it? So it's basic retail.
We talked a lot about explicitly and then I think implicitly about trust, and as a digital consumer, it's becoming more and more important, is it? There's trust in terms of security. We've had countless numbers of big security breaches impacting retailers. We see it in, as you just talked about, in terms of the replenishment, what's in your basket to start with. Is trust going to become an even more important ingredient in the mix of whether you want to use one retailer or another in a digital e-commerce world? It's quite a topical discussion, isn't it? If you look at maybe some of the feedback of the leadership at Tesco's, the answer to that would be yes. Opinion, yes. I think we've seen a number of the larger organisations in grocery start to price neutralise with a number of offers around, kind of vouchers back or consistency in pricing. Then trust and freshness and an understanding of where the products originated become the differentiating factors. So I think trust is a huge part of that, and I think as the ex-CEO of Tesco's has said, he believes that to be the fundamental reason why they have the issues at the moment. Whilst we're talking about trust, we want to look at the other elephant in the room, I suppose, in a sense, which is the move, whether it's going to happen or it's another matter, but I'm interested in your perspective from a technological perspective of being able to price things to the individual. I mean, in a sense, everything in retail comes full circle. In the good old days of retail, when nothing was priced, and you walked into a store and the store owner knew you, and you might have got a slightly advantageous price. We then moved, in a sense, to a much more anonymous sort of form of retailing, where everything is standardised in terms of pricing. Are we going to be moving back to a position of where the price you pay will be determined by the history of how loyal you are, what you purchased in the past, what other manufacturers are prepared to offer in terms of getting a trialist, etc. Is that an area that we're beginning to be able to play in, and what issues are there around it?
I couldn't give a defined answer on whether we'll arrive there. I can say that the underlying technology capability is close. So an understanding of the products you like and you buy, and the value of you as a consumer. So if you look in the digital space, the ability to offer a product, to flip someone off a brand, whether it be washing powder or something, exists. That's there and that's capable. So an understanding of the product, an understanding of how you spend and your propensity to spend, and an understanding of your socio-economic group, all that data exists and can be brought together and is used by specifically some of the insurance companies, but also some retailers to kind of evaluate the consumer. So the underlying ability to do that exists. I think some of the challenges will be around trust again, a trust conversation in the market. But there's no reason why, if that was an intent by a retailer to achieve, that couldn't be achieved quite efficiently.
Okay, the challenges in terms of I suppose the last few months and the implications now. Clearly, what's the consumer going to do next? How do you see from the data that you've got the shopping mission changes, and what implications is that going to have? We've talked about devices and what people use, but again, from a very practical perspective, if we're seeing a shift away from PC usage into mobile platforms, etc., from a retailer's perspective, how do you start to manage what platforms you develop for in a very changing world now?
Well, I think one's organisationally. I think answering that question is very difficult. We did some research internally in the organisation not so long ago, and the myriad of devices that exist out there now make it extremely difficult to kind of follow. So, and I think that's because they are going to grow and there's going to be more around. So I think it's more organisationally accepting that it's going to be difficult and it's going to be hard, and actually having the decision-making processes internally to work out which ones you target and which ones you spend most investments on. So I think there's an organisational piece of that. I think the change in behaviour will probably flip to somewhere we don't know, I'm afraid, to answer the question that way, because we certainly haven't called all the trends in the market so far. So I think it's about having a base technology set and a base decision-making process to be able to react to that quickly, and the data.
And I sense that's becoming more and more important, isn't it? Because that technology changes.
Yeah.
It's, as you say, it's unbelievably difficult to predict which app is going to be the flavour of the month.
Correct.
But what you're now going to have to start to be able to cope with is a technology stack that has the capacity to be able to take any device and move fast and quickly into it.
Well, so I think the consumer behaviour is changed by a number of things, and one of them is market entrance. And I think the real challenge for most organisations is maintaining at the pace that Amazon are going. And I think that if there's two things that I think will change, it'll be the mobile wallet or payments in general. I think that will have a level of impact we don't yet know. So I think that'll be one level of impact.
It's been a hell of a long time in coming. I mean, the mobile wallet has been heralded, I don't know, maybe for the past 6 or 7 years, but it hasn't really happened. I think mainly because it hasn't been in any of the owners' interests to cede control over the payment mechanism. But I suppose Apple with Apple Pay is having an impact in the marketplace, clearly in the States rather than anywhere else yet, but that's going to roll out. But your sense is that we are on the cusp of something significant happening in the mobile wallet area. We
think so, and it's more around the opportunities that provides. But we kind of think it has anyway. So if you think of Amazon as an example, you kind of have a mobile wallet with them already. They have your credit card details, they have your where you like things delivered, and you can pretty much engage with them any way you want. And it's the same with the grocers and larger retailers. So it's kind of not the complete mobile wallet in regards to being open to every payment mechanism and every organisation, but we're kind of on that journey. But what the mobile wallet will give is a set of data and information that means we can personalise and locate offers far better than we can today. I mean, there is in-store technology arriving that assists with that, but we think that's going to make a real difference. Exactly what difference we don't know, but we think it's going to make a difference. And then the other piece is the real investment that the Amazons etc. are putting in regards to fulfilment and logistics. So the whole predictive delivery modelling of working out what you bought previously and shipping that closer to where you live so that they can make a delivery promise that maybe some of the other guys can't catch up with. That we think will make a huge difference also.
All right. Well, you're listening to In Retail Conversation with, my name's David Roth, and today's guest is Neil Stewart from Salmon. Neil, we talked a little bit about click and collect earlier on. It's having a big impact. Let's just delve a little bit deeper quickly around it. As you can see from the slides here, click and collect is being actively marketed within the store. We're seeing more and more, I suppose, pick-up points, moving from the back of the store, being treated very much like as a sort of a pick-up area, much more now as a sort of a brand experience area. We're seeing more and more stores. I mean, this is an Asda store. Again, using click and collect as an intrinsic part of their product proposition and their value proposition, and the use of a whole series of sort of mobile, self-serve, digital technology for people to make purchases in the store. What are the fundamentals about click and collect? I mean, it's obviously becoming significantly more important, but what are the fundamentals from your perspective about how do you make it work for you?
Well, it's difficult. It's technically complex. It takes investment, and it takes complete engagement across a company. So if we look at the kind of the maturity of click and collect, it's been very. It was kind of made a little bit easier for the catalogue organisations like Argos because they understood local inventory. So you can't do click and collect really without knowing your local inventory unless you're shipping from a central spot to a store, which becomes expensive. So there's a understanding of actually the stock that I have, so that's one piece to overcome. The second major piece to overcome, and we saw when we worked with an organisation called Boots in the UK, is actually local store engagement, because initially when there's an order online, collect in store discussion, the intrinsic attitude from the store managers is it's
not my department.
Well, one it's another problem, and I'm sure there's enough of them at a local store level. So one is it's another problem, and secondly it's potential cannibalisation of my sales. and also there's a perceived job security issue there as well. So actually the professional management of the process of how a consumer goes into a store and how they're addressed and met, that's one challenge. But then secondly, there's also to get the store elephant in the room out, the remuneration process for the local store guys. So that's the second piece. In the UK, we think that maturity is kind of started to establish.
And by that, let's be frank. We're talking about how an individual store
Correct.
is rewarded.
Yep.
Is that sale that's click and collect attributed to that store sale? If it is, there's something in it for the store to actively make it work. If it isn't, the
Correct.
store a little bit more hands off.
Correct, and because e-com has kind of arrived at the side of an organisation and now starting to become central, it's which P&L gets attributed with that sale. Is it the e-com P&L or is it the store P&L? And organisations have worked through that challenge.
And from your experience, it should be what?
Well, it should be the organisational P&L. It should be if one of the organisations we deal with that delivers groceries, they actually call their delivery guys, customer care officers, and I think that's really important in regards to translating the experience you want when someone arrives in store. Which is, if I've ordered online, collect in store, then I want that department or that store enthused by me being there, and I think the reality of it is remuneration is part of that process. So I think it needs to be. We've seen it done in a number of different models. We've seen it done for both. We've seen it roll up to a top P&L, but the challenge has to be overcome.
Okay. Connecting the bricks and clicks together.
Yep. So that's technology, and that takes time, and that's mainly about data and inventory, but also about messaging and kind of some very robust IT. So that takes time and it takes investment. So it needs to be a strategic drive from the top of the company. The latest thing that we've seen it arrive with is actually provide insight of, do we have stock in the right place? So if you go through the process of a peak, you can get to see the user experience of people trying to pick up in the local store and actually that product not being there but being somewhere else. And the more sophisticated retailers that we work with are now being able to offer kind of a dual promise around click and collect. So order online and collect in store now, or actually order online and collect in the store this afternoon. And what's happening in the background there is they're managing stock across the store base. So that's the next piece to it.
And shifting stock from one store to another.
Correct. Yeah.
So, into stock transfers.
Correct. Yeah.
Stock transfers. And,
correct. Yeah. And utilising the infrastructure that generally exists in those organisations anyway, but they're making the customer experience as they would like it. So that seems to be the next limit that we're seeing. And also I think what's really good about that is coming back to. E-com just isn't about transaction, it's also about insight. So intrinsically a store manager will know whether a store is busy or not, and sales will point to that, but actually there's real facts of demand now, which is wanting to pick up a product within that store, and if they can't, being able to track whether they went to a different store or actually whether that sale was lost. So
and what other customer service issues can be sort of solved or helped by doing e-commerce better, understanding the data better, and being able to sort of better link the bricks and the clicks? I mean, in a funny sort of way, bricks seem to be the new black. And I mean, the notion of having both clicks and stores is very much in vogue now.
It is, as long as the stores are in the right place.
Yes.
I think that's the question. Well, I mean, there's obviously customer service opportunities there. There's a real. I mean, from a brand perspective. That whole my concept, whether that be the ability to log your interest in products or log in warranties or log in other things direct, enables you to have an aggregated place to manage customer service calls or how-tos or videos. So I mean, it isn't e-commerce in the purest sense of a transaction, but it is an environment that enables you to have a direct relationship with the client, even if you decide not to sell. And actually being able to then analyse that insight and do something about it, which again in an e-commerce format is pretty easy to do.
Well, we're almost coming to the end of our conversation. I think it's a good time and a place to summarise in a sense, and maybe just talk about the 10 things or so, maybe 8, maybe more, that every brand needs to start to remember about e-commerce. And I think your first issue is it might be e-commerce, but normal rules still apply, don't they?
Well, it's still, price is still a major driver, availability is still a major driver, convenience is still a major driver. So yeah, don't forget the basics. I think is one of the lessons we try to teach the organisations that we deal with. There has been there has been a propensity to expect if I build an e-com store, I will just get growth because the growth markets have been so good in this space. We think those days are over. You know, there's enough competition around that means all the basics of retail are still where they need to be, which is good because that tends to be what retailers are pretty good.
There's your company, Salmon, is an interesting example of this next point in a sense, which is, you know, been around for 20 years, technology has changed, the product offering that you've delivered has changed. And again, from an e-commerce perspective, just because it's worked in the past does not necessarily mean it's going to work in the future now, does it?
Unfortunately not, no.
And that cycle is getting faster and faster.
It is, yeah, and I think that comes down to that organisational structure piece we discussed at the start, which is in order to make decisions quickly, you know, you need data, you need decision-making processes, and then actually, unfortunately, for most people, you need technology people as well. And most organisations are structured separately in those areas, and actually being able to bring that together to get an art of the possible from the technology people, which is what can we do quickly to react to the data and the insight that it provides. So I think that's a key learning that most of the organisations we deal with are going through at present, which is actually the old departmental structure doesn't quite.
I think it's becoming much more apparent now, isn't it? That if you want, call it what you like, an omni-channel seamless experience from the customer, it's absolutely impossible to deliver that if you have a siloed internal organisation.
Correct.
It just won't work.
It just won't work, and there's enough examples of that out in the market, I think.
And aligned to that, I mean, customers also don't see channels. When we talk about channels, that's very much a sort of a retailer speak. Customers are now not viewing channels, are they?
No, they just see. Well, they hopefully see some inspiration, and then that means the marketeers are doing a good job. So they see some inspiration, and then they see a product that they want, and then the whole concept of I can buy it online, but I can't take it back to the store is you know, and we do customer surveys to present those back to clients so that they can see the impact of that. But that still exists, by the way. You know, that what they see is the relationship with a brand or a retailer or whoever that may be, and expect to shop where they want, buy when they want, and kind of engage across the set.
And they now expect sort of customer service in a sense throughout those touch points, and those touch points are getting bigger and bigger. So it's not just, you know, online, offline in a sense. And I think actually, funnily enough, that segmentation online, offline, I think we're going to look back in 5 years' time and think, what a bizarre thing we were talking about. It is going to be retail. But you know, whether it's a service desk or it's a tweet, people are expecting, and whatever comes next after the next new thing after Twitter, they're going to be expecting customer service throughout the journey of things that they use in order to understand the offer and decide to make a purchase.
Yeah, and the forward-thinking organisations that are providing that service today are setting the consumer expectation, and I think that's the real challenge for most companies is that there are pathfinders out there that are doing this, and that becomes an expected level of service by any consumer. I'm sure it's the same for you, David, and then the other organisations having to stay on that path with what can be a substantial and quite a challenging investment.
E-commerce now is not about somebody sort of shopping your website and from their PC, is it? It's much more having an infrastructure that can satisfy the needs of all the consumers. But the complexity of that now is getting vast, and the fact of actually having a single capability that enables you to do that. How challenging is that for an organisation?
It's easier if you're starting from nothing. It's a lot harder if you're starting from a sets of something, and I think I mean, let's be clear, it's been around for long enough now. You know, as we've discussed, we've been doing it for 15 years. It's achievable, but I think it's only achievable in an environment where consideration past the technology set is accepted. So technology is one thing. It needs people and data and insight to run it. Otherwise, you get no value from the investment. And also it needs sponsorship to be part of an intrinsic part of the customer journey. So I think with all those things in place, it's achievable. It's been done before.
We've had a lot of questions already on payments. Obviously, it's a hot topic, and a lot of those questions are around if mobile payments, mobile wallets, whatever you want to call them, are going to be a thing coming out, being more adopted by both retailers and consumers in the course of the next few years. What does one need to do now in order to maximise the advantage of that, be it a data play, be it a personalisation play. You know, what should we all now be thinking about?
Anything to do with payments around security. So that's obviously the first piece. So do we have an environment where we're completely confident that it's secure and can be accredited to be secure? And that is no small investment. That takes time. There are tools and capabilities out there that help organisations pass that risk on to other organisations that have that investment. So there's products out there that tokenise the offer. So that would be a very practical recommendation from ourselves. I think also being very clear about any payment integration they become involved in, and make sure the data contract is understood correctly. So we believe some of those mobile payments will arrive and they'll be accepted by the consumer market, but actually you as a brand may get access to the data that you want. So I think being very clear on the value of that purchase and data and ability to have a direct relationship with the consumer is very important. So kind of security and what we would call class as making sure you're clear on what type of data contract that you would like with any payment provider.
I mean, with all of the data trail that's available now throughout your sort of digital path to purchase, it's vast.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about big data in a structured sense, but are you finding now that just the sheer quantity of data that retailers now have and brand owners potentially get access to is going to be an advantage if you can understand what it means?
I think that's the key point. It's if you can understand what it means, and actually you are able to act on the insight that it provides. And I think that's the maturity curve. I think one is accepting that the data is valuable. Two is making sure you have a capability to understand and get some insight from it, which actually is happening in the market from what we see. But then it's also okay. Now we know what it tells us. Can we act on it quickly? And I think that's the next phase that needs to happen.
And finally, Neil, technology is the enabler, isn't it? But
we like to think so.
But really, what makes it work is technology, is the relationships and the capability to glue it all together and make it actually work for both the retailer and, most importantly, for the customer.
Yeah, and for the brand as well. And I think that's technology is extremely important because it's the basis of how the customer experience is provided. But that doesn't take away the absolute need for the insight from a retailer and from the brands to be able to put on their unique offering. And I think that's there. So it absolutely is people and technology together. It's not one or the other.
Right. Well, Neil, thank you very much indeed. We've almost come to the end. Thanks very much indeed for your insight. If you want to get hold of Neil, understand a little bit more about Salmon and how they can help you, or a little bit more about what's going on in e-commerce, Neil's details are on the screen, and you can send me an email, david.roth@wpp.com, and I will give you all of his contact details, but it's www.salmon.com and hashtag at Salmon Limited. Neil, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We have a few copies, 3 copies of the recent book, History in Retail in 100 Objects. We've talked a lot about retailing today. And in that book there are also a few objects that haven't yet been invented or haven't yet been commercialised yet, and a thought piece on retail of the future. We've got 3 of those books. If you want to be the proud owner of one of those, all you need to do is just send me a tweet at David Roth London, and we will randomly select 3 people and we'll send that over to you. Well, that's all from us. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Thank you very much indeed to my guest, Neil Stewart, Chief Executive of Salmon. Thanks for your insight. If you want to get in touch with me, yes, please send an email, tweet, go on the blog. From everybody here at WPP and from the store, thank you very much indeed for watching.